All right, we are live in the Dyke trial out of Illinois 2014 case where a former police officer, a white officer, is standing trial for shooting and killing a black teen. Specifically, he got out of the car within 30 seconds of arriving on scene, and within 6 seconds of stepping out of the car, unloaded within about 16 seconds his entire barrel of shots, 16 shots. With me, criminal defense attorney Rahul Manchanda. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
So nice to have you on set. We haven't had a chance to talk before or ahead of time. How do you think it's going so far while we're on this sidebar for this case? Any initial thoughts?
Well, it's one of those cases where, Chicago has a lot of problems. I mean, obviously, this is actually where Obama came from, the whole, grassroots, but there's a lot of issues with Chicago that are very, very controversial with law enforcement and the civilian population. A couple of years ago, they had discovered that, secret facility where they would detain individuals, sort of extra constitutionally, and things like that. And I think that they're really struggling, sort of like analogous to what happened in New Orleans like 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think they're kind of going through this stuff. And I think this probably wouldn't happen in New York and the NYPD. They've been cleaned out a lot. Certainly, New York City Mayor de Blasio has done a lot to address some of these issues. But this really strikes me as very, very almost, it's very incredible. The person was running away, he had a knife, and shot this many times. There's no explanation for this. This is something that happened, the Diallo case, for example, 20 years ago in New York City. So I'm actually very shocked by this, and I'd like to see how this case develops. But I really think that this is one of those, come to terms talks for Chicago. It's really about time to deal with this stuff because this is really, really outlandish.
Right. And right now in the feed right now, we can see the live video of the officers arriving on scene. And I think anyone who watches this video would find it hard to not be shocked because you see the victim actually moving away from the cops, running, crossing the median. So of course there's going to be public outrage when a video like this is released. So before we're going to continue chatting because they're on a sidebar, but we're still live in the courtroom. And for those watching, we're keeping a close eye on the courtroom. And as soon as we have something for you, we're going to go right back into the room. But we were just listening to a restaurant manager sort of authenticate a video. I'm assuming this is the video that we've been watching because I know that that we had difficulty having the right dash cam get the right angle to actually witness the crime. Why is it important to authenticate this kind of evidence? Why do we have to go through that procedural process?
Well, absolutely. That's a great question. The reality is authentication of evidence is absolutely essential. Otherwise, anybody could put in anything. It could be considered hearsay, any photographic evidence, any kind of newspaper clippings, any kind of tangible evidence that you're submitting to support your case or to negate your case. That has to be authenticated because the bottom line is, under the federal rules of evidence, you've got to authenticate everything. You can't just, throw in anything. So for the layperson, authentication of evidence is absolutely critical to, sort of administrate your case and move it forward. A lot of hearings and trials, they have what's called a traverse hearing. They have certain separate hearings based on evidentiary rulings and evidence, and that can sort of be a battle. And in this situation, it's absolutely essential for that to happen.
We have to, I think, go to a quick break. So hold the rest of that thought. When we get back, we're going to go back into the courtroom and have more in-studio analysis. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. We have a live feed in the courtroom in the Dyke trial out of Illinois 2014 case where a former white cop is standing trial for the murder of a black teen. The question is whether or not this was racially motivated, excessive force, reasonable under the circumstance to use deadly force to stop what was happening or allegedly happening on scene when the officers arrived. With me, Rahul Manchanda. I want to talk about this right now. We're listening to an FBI forensics examiner who is syncing up 2 dash cam videos, which is the best evidence we have since it's actually the video evidence which capture the moments leading up to the murder or crime or alleged murder and the moments after it. What are your takeaway points so far of these 2 dash cams being synced up together? I know during break you said this is CSI at its greatest.
Yep.
What else do you have to say to that?
Well, this is a feat of modern day, forensic science. So this is really where technology catches up with Perry Mason, in the sense that we've actually now got 2 different videos from 2 different vantage points synced together. One is a little bit more clear than the other. But, these kinds of technologies today, that really were developed by the government have now filtrated to the private world and private practice and really helps to elucidate and enunciate, sort of see what's going on. And I really think this is going to be absolutely essential to find out, what really happened here? What was the chain of events? You know, step one, step two, step three, and I think that really will help. You know, both sides actually, I think.
Right. You know, and what's also important to know is this isn't the only video we have. We also have the video from the restaurant establishment that captured it. So it's important that we have all these different perspectives because the jurors have to sort of understand and have a perspective of what the officer may have been thinking in that moment at that time from his vantage point. So all these different vantage points lend insight into whether or not it could be reasonable or not. We have to take a quick break. Stick with us. We will be right back. Welcome back. I'm Carissa Kranz. Thanks for sticking with us through the break. We are live in the courtroom in the Van Dyke trial. We have a jam-packed rundown of trials we're covering here on the network. And remember, you can always go on the network to watch the other trials if you want updates on those. But this is our main trial right now for the rest of the day today. They are going on a few-minute break. I just got word in the courtroom and from the control room. So here's a quick recap for those of you just joining us. This is the case out of Illinois, 2014 case where a former white cop shoots and kills a black teenage boy for allegedly breaking into trucks with a knife armed. Officers arrived on scene. The video cameras that show the footage show him actually, there's the footage, going away from the officers when the defendant arrives on scene. And within 30 seconds of arriving on scene, the victim is shot and killed. He unloads 16 shots within the following 16 seconds. Pretty severe facts that the jury is listening to. With me, Rahul Manchanda, a criminal defense attorney. You defend criminals or alleged criminals. That's your job, right?
Right.
How would you defend this case? We have video evidence, and from what I hear, the prosecution is putting on a strong case.
You know, I really don't see a way out of this for the officer. I mean, 16 shots, you know, the guy's running away with a knife. I mean, the optics are horrible here. I mean, I just don't see it. Surrounded by a whole plethora of police cars and Jeeps. I mean, the reality is the guy was walking around with a knife, walking away from the scene. 16 shots. How does this look?
Not only walking away, if you watch the video, he actually picks up speed and starts hopping and skipping and almost running away from the cops.
And he was, what, 17 years old? I mean, you know, the reality is this is incredible fact pattern. I just don't see it. I don't see a wiggle room out of this. I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, if you can't even defend yourself by saying it was the heat of the moment, you know, crime, you know.
And what's worse is you're hearing these other officers say that they didn't feel an imminent threat at that moment. So the question is whether this officer was reasonable for him to feel threatened, which seems almost impossible when he just arrived on scene, and everyone else on scene says that they didn't feel threatened. But it's going to come down to the storyline and the narrative and what the jury actually believes. Let's take a look at prosecution's opening statements where the prosecution pieces together the narrative, which so far so good. The case they're putting on matches their narrative. So they're doing a good job. Let's take a look.
When he was carrying
Back, that's prosecution's opening statements, and they are laying the field and laying the groundwork of what the jury can expect to hear. And then you can bet that they're going to say, we told you what you're going to hear, then we showed you, and now we did everything we said we're going to do, and in closing arguments, we can expect to hear them say, you must return a guilty verdict. With me, Rahul, let's talk about that during the break. You said they're going to have a pretty hard time coming back from this, and it's very interesting that the officers are not defending their own. Why? What do you think about that?
I mean, absolutely unusual. You know, all these kinds of cases I've seen, there's like a sort of a thin blue line in the situation. You know, you always opt on the side of your colleagues, you know, heat of the moment situation. You know, I mean, no police officer, a reasonable police officer is going to second guess the actions of another police officer because it's, you know, you're under fire, you're under stress, crack unit decisions are made, you know, within seconds. It could be, you know, difference between life and death for your colleagues. So for them sort of not to come to his assistance or actually even testify against him is shocking. It's actually very unusual. Remember the Diallo case, for example, or other kinds of cases, you know, where this is a similar fact pattern. You always see police officers saying, look, you know, the bottom line is when you're in this situation, you know, a layperson really couldn't understand it. You know, it's kill or be killed in that situation. And for this to happen and develop in this way is very, very unusual, in my opinion.
Well, I think it's possible that in this situation, they may have wanted to line up with him and protect him, because you're right, it is unusual. But once this social media video came out and these dash cams were synced up and the restaurant actually caught him crossing the median, going away, not towards, but away from the officers as if he's trying to escape, that does not rise to the use of deadly force, that he was actually mitigating, not escalating a situation, and then suddenly, within seconds, you see his body go into convulsions, and he is shot and killed on the pavement, on the concrete, dead. And then you see the other officer go up to him, kick the knife away. So how can a team of officers really back their own kind when all of that is caught on not one camera, but multiple cameras?
Well, in the day and age, this political climate that we're living in, the Trayvon case, for example, I mean, this is front and center. Twitter feeds, social media feeds, Facebook feeds, this stuff is front and center. The Obama administration for 8 years really kind of put a spotlight on this stuff. And, we're still sort of feeling the Department of Justice, it went into this issue with all 50 states. Loretta Lynch went into this. So this is something that is really not going to go away. We may have a new administration, which is very, very pro-police, and that's a different story. But these kinds of issues, the remnants are still there in the DOJ. On the local level, and sort of, changing infrastructure. So it's really going to be hard, I think, for this officer to get away with something like this in this situation. It's really going to be hard to defend himself in this situation, in my opinion.
It's the state's burden to prove. We now should take a look at defense's opening statements. Now, prosecution is still putting on their case. They're putting on a strong case. But what can we expect the defense to really say to defend the actions of the defendant, Van Dyke? Let's take a look at defense's opening statements to set the tone of what we can expect of why he arrived on scene and unloaded 16 shots so quickly.